put myself in a moment. All right, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So I'll just go ahead and kick this off. Today we have with us Bill Popp, President and CEO of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation, and I know a lot of you are familiar. Since 2007, he has worked with AEDC, where he sets the strategic direction in marketing Anchorage and Alaska to companies, critical workforces, and global industries, considering Alaska and Anchorage a place to do business. Today we'll be having a conversation with Bill about Anchorage and Alaska economies and how they have changed in the last year. And with that, I'll kick it off over to Bill. Welcome.
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me here today. I'm going to be wanting to share screen here in just a moment. Just checking on that to see if I can do that. Looking for that feature. I always lose it on Microsoft Teams. Where did it go?
It is
off to a great start here.
Yeah, top right next to your button that says leave.
There we go. Got it. Okay, and we're going to go with screen one. And hopefully you all can see my presentation. I'm going to move it over to this screen because unfortunately the camera's not pointed here. Different formats, different folks. Here we go. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Sorry for all the technical problems. It's feeling like a Monday today a little bit. It's great to be here with everyone. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things today and a lot of different issues and challenges that we're facing. We are going to take a look at what COVID-19 has done to the economy. I'm going to give you a sneak peek of the latest Consumer Optimism Index, which is one of our key indicators of the attitudes of local consumers, which is incredibly important in our service-based economy. And then I'm going to use the 3-year outlook forecast that we presented on August 5th at our mid-year event as a platform for talking about where things stand. So I'm going to just dive right off into this. We've got a lot to cover and I don't want to dilly-dally here, so let's just get going. First, we're going to take a look at the mid-year jobs update, and that starts with taking a look at where we're coming from. 2019 was the 5th year of recession for the city of Anchorage. We have been dealing with this long recession, the first recession we've had since the mid-1980s. We have lost 6,000 jobs during this recession and have felt pain in varying ways for the last several years. 300 jobs lost last year, about a 0.2% decline. It was looking like we were turning the corner in mid-year, but then in the 4th quarter, we had a couple of pretty bad months with November losing 800 jobs and December losing jobs. So that took us back into negative territory. 5.1% unemployment is actually lower than the year before, which seems odd if we're losing jobs. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into the population and labor force data. So let's move along here. So how are we doing this year? Well, it's pretty awful. There's just no other way to describe it. We have lost 11,400 jobs, and actually that header is a little behind. I need to update that. That's through September. We're down about 11,400 jobs, right at about a 7.5% loss in jobs compared to the previous year, same 9-month period. Average unemployment is at 11.6%, unprecedented in the modern age of Anchorage. When we dig into the details, let's look at the monthly data first. You can see the first 3 months we were tracking okay. We were down about 800 jobs in the first quarter. Recession still carrying forward. I think a little bit of anxiousness about COVID in the first quarter contributed to that. And then you can see where the bottom fell out when we had to go into shutdown in March, and that led to the big losses that we saw in April. We've come back a little bit, but we're still down pretty substantially in recent months compared to last year. The blue bar represents service sector jobs in each month's tally, and the red portion of the bar represents goods producing jobs, construction, manufacturing, jobs that make something. It's a pretty small part of our overall economy, but still not to be discounted because those are good paying jobs for the most part. We are looking at preliminary data here. I want to tell you that normally the preliminary data, when jobs are up, it tends to undercount by how much. And when jobs are down, it tends to undercount how badly we are down. We think that these numbers will probably see some adjustments when the hard numbers come out, beginning later in the fourth quarter and into the first and second quarter of next year when we get the actual hard numbers. We think it's going to be a little worse. So it's not turning out to be a very good year for the city of Anchorage. When we look at the unemployment rate, you can see very significant spike in unemployment beginning in April, and that trend has continued. It did start to trail down a little bit through July, but then we had the closure in August for restaurants and the bars, eating establishments. That really hurt. It's since eased a little bit and we're back, but still 11.5% in the most recent months reporting. This is really, really a tough year for jobs. I would tell you that about 50% of the job losses are landing in the leisure and hospitality sector. Restaurants, hotels, bars, and then to a lesser degree, retail and the hotel industry. I'll show you those numbers in a moment, but it's been disproportionately landing on lower income jobs in our community, the true service sector. White collar jobs are coming through with some pain, but relatively, comparatively speaking, relatively unscathed. So we've got this kind of odd dichotomy in our economy where we have plenty of folks who are doing well and a lot of folks who are really, really suffering right now. And there's not a lot of in between. So moving into the actual numbers for the sectors so far this year, down about 4,200 jobs. I would tell you that in August and September, the leisure and hospitality sector saw losses closer to 6,000 jobs a month. Pretty painful. Retail trade down 1,300 for the year. Goods producing jobs comes in third in terms of job losses, down by 1,100. That's painful in the sense that it is landing mainly in the construction and oil and gas side. That's where most of the losses have been locally in the jobs that are based here in Anchorage. Overall, by the way, oil and gas statewide is down 2,900 jobs. About 1/3 of the workforce has been laid off in direct oil and gas employment on the North Slope and in, to a lesser degree in Cook Inlet. That is a symptom of a global meltdown in the oil markets that continues to see great uncertainty in the future of the oil marketplace. We've seen some pretty significant losses this week in average daily prices as COVID starts to take more of a hold in several parts of the world as we move into winter. It's going to be a real tough winter. Surprisingly, for many people, healthcare is down about an average of 1,000 jobs this year. That's because of procedures that were more of a voluntary nature. Non-essential procedures have been curtailed by both the healthcare system as well as a general lack of willingness on the part of local citizens to go to hospitals and healthcare facilities for fear that they might catch COVID-19. That's where people who are sick go, and the association is, if I go there, I may catch the disease. So that's really set aside a lot of procedures that keep hospitals going to closer to maximum capacity on these voluntary procedures, non-essential procedures. And that has resulted in a layoff, not of doctors or nurses or technicians, but more in the white collar jobs that support those procedures and those positions. Clerical, as well as food services, as well as janitorial. Again, lower end of the wage spectrum in the jobs that have been laid off in the healthcare sector. This is painful for us because in the last 15 years, healthcare has accounted for about 1/3 of Anchorage job growth. This is the first negative year we have seen in that period of time. So again, unprecedented. So I talked about the unemployment trend for 2019 and why it was a little bit lower might be something of a surprise. And here's the picture of what's going on. So your unemployment rate is based on the size of your labor force and the number of people who don't have jobs in that labor force. What is the labor force? It's the people who are citizens of Anchorage who have a job and citizens of Anchorage who don't have a job but are actively looking for a job. You combine those two numbers, that's your labor force. So you can see that we were reaching a peak back in 2011. And then a couple of years later, as we entered into the collapse of the oil markets in 14, that led to the oil recession that is now carried over in Anchorage for an additional 3 years beyond that oil recession due to fiscal policy issues at the state level, creating uncertainty and other related problems to that. We are now seeing a decline in our labor force. And it's become pretty substantial. We're down about 10,000 people in our labor force from where we were at our all-time record high in 2011. We are tracking IRS data that tells us a lot of these people are leaving the state. They were leaving the state during the recession to the lower 48 for the hotter economy. And we were losing 1,500 to 2,000 people a year from our city. Now, some of those folks were moving to the valley. That takes them out of our labor force, even though they continue to fill jobs here. But we have seen a marked, notable out-migration, net out-migration from Anchorage to the lower 48 of size. Usually we get a couple of years where we've got some slight losses in population to the lower 48, and then it turns around and we get in-migration, you know, modest, sometimes not bad, but this has been remarkable in the number of consecutive years that we have seen this out-migration. And this is a problem because this is taking energy out of our economy that we're going to need when we have jobs to fill, when we start to regrow the economy, start to go into the recovery, hopefully next year, and that we're going to need bodies to fill those jobs. And we may find ourselves in a position of jobs going unfilled for lack of qualified or available candidates. That's a problem in terms of getting our recovery going. So it's going to be something that we're going to be watching very closely in the coming weeks and months. So here it is, the Consumer Optimism Index. You know, a part of it is optimism on the part of consumers, their willingness to spend, to go out and buy clothes or buy a new house or go on, you know, go out to dinner or go to the movies, you know, all of those things that we remember fondly pre-COVID. But still, it's an important element in terms of their willingness to spend money is based in no small part on their optimism for their personal situation, the local economy in the future. So we track this on a quarterly basis. We present these results to the public, and you're going to be seeing this report coming out next week, but you're getting a sneak peek of the indicators. So let's dive into this. So for the third quarter, the indicator stood at 49.2. Now, I've got a graphic here from the second quarter that shows where the score was, and you can see 49.3, we're down a tenth. The way the ranking works is it's a scale of 1 to 100. Anything below 50 is leaning to the pessimistic. Anything above 50 is leaning to the optimistic. We do qualify that from 45 to 55, that's our we're not sure range. We're not really pessimistic. We're not really optimistic. We're trying to make up our minds. So 49.2 in the greater scheme of things is not a bad score. But there's an underlying story on why the number remained this high in the third quarter. These are the three indicators that the survey of 500 people in Anchorage gives us. And it's focused on three main questions. What's your confidence in the local economy? What's your confidence in your own personal finances? And what is your confidence in the future of the economy? Well, local economic confidence went down by almost 4 points. That was a marked decrease into firmly negative territory. Personal financial confidence, inversely, went up 4 points. Now, we were really surprised by this number when we first got it, but when we started to think about it and dig into it a little bit, it dawned on us that this was the period of time that was receiving the maximum benefit from pandemic unemployment assistance. The additional $600 that you received every month if you were unemployed from April through the end of July. And we had a lot of reporting that folks receiving that money were setting it aside because they knew that it wasn't going to go beyond the end of July, and they've been keeping it in the bank. So we think that that, combined with the business assistance coming from different grant programs through the city, through the state to businesses, and the federal PPP programs, AK Cares from the state, all have combined to provide a little oomph to personal financial confidence. Money in the bank, financial security that otherwise might not be there if it weren't for that assistance. Future expectations went down by a full point. markedly negative territory. So if we hadn't seen the spike in personal financial confidence, we would have seen a bigger drop in the overall metric. But these are things that we have to pay attention to. So it is good that there is personal financial confidence out there, but this is just a snapshot in time. Pandemic unemployment assistance has run out. There's a small amount still about to be distributed. It'll be a lump sum up to $1,800. We are a little concerned that many will take that $1,800 and use it to help them get out of state to the lower 48 to a less expensive place to ride out this unemployment situation that they are in, and also do what a lot of people do and go back and circle the wagons with family and go join up with family to ride out the current troubling times. Again, potentially more gas on the out-migration fire, which we are watching and are very concerned about. So let's look ahead for the next 3 years. This is our forecast that we present every year. We just presented it on August the 5th. The McDowell Group put this together for us, and we're deeply appreciative of the support of these sponsors who helped to make this report possible. This is the most in-depth report that the McDowell Group has ever produced for us, and you can find it on our website, and you'll have that address at the end of this presentation. So let's talk about population. Our population has been in decline since basically 2013, when we reached our peak of 301,000. That was a record for population in Anchorage. But in recent years, we have been seeing a steady decline in our population, so much so that we are projecting that we will be down to 291,000 citizens residing in the city of Anchorage at the end of this year. That's down 10,000 people since 2011. That's a pretty significant drop for a city of our size, and we are projecting going forward another 5,000 lost over the next 3 years. Anchorage is a really expensive city, comparatively speaking, to the lower 48. There are other cities that are more expensive than us, like Seattle or Portland or San Francisco, but there are a large number of cities that are much less expensive than us. In the cost of living index survey of 262 cities nationwide, Anchorage is the 22nd most expensive city, and our cost of living is 26% above the national average cost of living. Groceries, as an example, we are the 7th most expensive, almost 34% more expensive than the average city in the United States. That's a tough place to be when you're unemployed and your benefits are somewhat minimal, like ours in Alaska, or God forbid that they have run out. That makes for a really tough situation to try and ride out for months and months until we get to next spring, where we hope to see things start to turn around. So we are concerned that this population flight may be even a little bit worse than we are projecting. But currently, we're projecting that we'll be down at 286,000 people by the end of 2023. Anchorage unemployment, we are projecting a loss on average for the year of 11,000 people, 11,000 jobs, touching every sector. There is not a sector in Anchorage right now, other than the federal government, that has not lost jobs. And the only reason the federal government has not lost jobs is because they were hiring up for the census. That just ended. We expect them to lay off all those workers, and they will probably, as a net for the year, be down just slightly, 200-300 jobs. So we are dealing with some pretty significant challenges on the employment front. We are projecting a return to growth. I apologize for the light colors in the bars in the outlying 3 years, but we are going to see a little over 3,000 jobs added next year, a couple thousand more the year after, and another 1,000 to 1,500 jobs in 2023. But to put it into context, by the time we get to the end of 2023, we'll still be down over 4,000 jobs from where we began this year. And if you add that to the 6,000 jobs that we lost during the recession, we're still going to be down 10,000 jobs from where we were at our peak in 2015. We got a long road ahead for recovery before we can actually say that we have fully recovered from the double hit of the recession and the pandemic. It's just going to be a tough road, but we are returning to growth and getting into recovery next year if all things move ahead. That is predicated on a couple of variables. We do believe that a vaccine will start to be deployed next year. We don't expect it to be fully deployed, but that will help. We are hopeful that the tourism industry will start to recover next year, which was a big portion of the job losses that we had this year, with a lost year of outside visitor traffic. Let's move on to the next view. Personal income, thanks to pandemic unemployment assistance and over $1.5 billion in additional federal aid that has been provided to the state, we believe that we are only going to see a modest loss, comparatively speaking, of personal income between 2019 and 2020, a little over $1 billion worth of personal income lost. Part of that is stock market earnings, part of that is job losses. It all combines, it all contributes, but it is not as bad as it could have been without that federal assistance. We see a small, steady return to growth in personal income in the outlying 3 years, but it's probably going to be another year or two beyond that before we get back where we were at our all-time record high in Anchorage in 2019. Air passenger volume was a train wreck. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. The complete loss of out-of-state tourism this year has devastated our passenger operations at Anchorage International Airport and the carriers that serve our city. This has been really bad news for this sector. We are down 60% in the number of passenger enplanements that we are projecting for this year. If it hadn't been for the first quarter, it would have been probably closer to 75%. But luckily, things had still been operating fairly well in the first quarter. This has really been a tough hit to one of our major job generators in Anchorage, with all the jobs in pilots and ground crew and onboard service personnel, as well as the service industries that serve that side of the airport. So it's going to be a tough road back. We are hopeful that we'll see the beginnings of a recovery next year in air passenger traffic, and we are hopeful that that will continue. That will be predicated mainly on the ability of the cruise industry to get passengers back on their ships. When we look at air freight volume, however, this is the inverse. This is an opportunity for us in the fact that we are going to see some growth this year in total tonnage coming through Anchorage International Airport. Anchorage International Airport is the 5th busiest cargo airport on the planet. And this is something that has been a big help to our overall economy as a job generator related to that air cargo operations. It's made our airport very successful in a lot of ways that it might not otherwise be. With the cancellation of international flights from Asia to the United States, there was a lot of belly cargo in the luggage compartments of those planes that was going to North America or to Asia on those flights. When those flights were canceled, they had to find another way to get that product to and from the United States or Asia, and it's been the traditional cargo routes that have benefited from that transference of cargo. We do expect to see a slight decrease in tonnage over the next year in 2021 due to what we believe is going to be the full impact of the recession on the lower 48 and in Asia from COVID. But then we see a slow, steady return, and we're almost back up to where we were this year by the end of 2023. Port of Alaska volume is doing quite well, all things considered. We did have some slowdowns earlier this year, but I'm getting recent reports from our 2 major container traffic carriers, Matson and Tote, that volumes are doing well here in the 3rd quarter and 4th and going into the 4th quarter. But the big beneficiary for the port has been the increased demand for jet fuel, thanks to the air cargo side of things. Those aircraft load up with a lot more fuel than the passenger aircraft do, and it's offset the losses from demand on the passenger side to a significant degree and has added a lot more tonnage coming over the docks at the Port of Alaska. We do project a modest slowdown next year, in part due to the slowdown in air cargo volume, but we do see a slow and steady recovery of that tonnage over the next few years. Single-family homes has been a success story in our community this year again. We have seen a drop in available inventory of almost 1/3 compared to last year at this time and throughout the year. That has led to a lack of inventory in the face of higher than expected demand, thanks in no small part to a lot of families who haven't been impacted by COVID, who've reached a point where they need to move up size demands, need a bigger house. We've also seen historically low interest rates this year. So this demand combined with low interest rates has really generated a lot of activity this year. And average sale prices are up. It has been a great seller's market this year. If you were selling your home this year and priced it correctly, you would be pretty happy because it was a very good year. Now, we don't project forward. There are a couple of minor clouds on the horizon. Will consumer confidence continue in a negative or positive direction when it comes especially to personal finance? We have to wait and see. Is there additional federal aid coming? Other things that are going to help the overall confidence attitudes of Anchorage consumers to make them to continue to be willing to go out and pursue a new home. It's a big investment, not something you do lightly. But we think the siren call of low interest rates, this incredibly low interest rate, 2.5% on a 30-year mortgage, is something that may outweigh some of those concerns and may keep the market at least solid in the coming year. So we're going to have to wait and see how it develops. There is more inventory also, hopefully, going to be constructed. There were a number of permits taken out in recent months for new single-family developments. We'll see if they actually construct those. A permit is not a promise to construct. It's just the first step in getting a project moving. So let's talk about oil for a minute. Oil is a big issue in our state, as you all probably know. In the past, it has been able to pay 90% or more of the needs of our state government. Those days are behind us. We can think of them fondly. They are not coming back, nor will they ever likely come back because of any number of factors in global markets, in a potential peak demand point being reached by the end of this decade or the middle of next decade, depending on which oil company's projection you want to follow. But when we hit peak demand, that is kind of the apogee of when demand for oil hits a peak and then starts a slow, steady decline as other energy sources replace it. Now, maybe natural gas, it may be renewable energy, it may be something else that we haven't even thought of yet. But there is a growing belief in the oil markets that this is going to likely be the case. Doesn't mean that oil no longer is in demand. It will be. It is a vital, basic element of any number of aspects of our global economy. But the demand for it is going to start to decline, and that is going to make more expensive provinces like ours challenged in competing for the investments necessary to develop new oil reserves. As you can see in this track record of prices, we had a real boom back in 2011 through 2014, just huge global price spikes, leading North Slope crude to as high as $140 a barrel almost. But you can also notice that that was kind of hiding a more difficult issue for us to deal with, and that is declining production. The old tax regime of ACEs had really constrained new investment. It was all about producing as much as you could from existing fields and not developing new fields, new resources. And that led us into the situation that we have been in here recently. With the collapse of oil prices in 2014-15, and you can see it dropping down into the 50s and then even down into the 40s in 2016, oil dropped down into the 20s back there in that period of time. And that was pretty devastating to our state budget. Then we had a slight recovery of price, and we did have some modest increases in production, but it did not solve our problems. And then this year with COVID, we saw the total collapse of global oil markets to the point where prices went into negative territory, even for North Slope crude. Literally, you had to pay somebody to take your oil. I don't know that that actually happened with North Slope crude, but as far as the proposed prices, they went negative. And that is just unprecedented. When we look at future demand and future pricing models, both at the government level, at the state, at the federal, international energy authorities, as well as the private sector markets, we come up with our projections for the next 3 years in prices, and there is nothing to phone home about in those prices. Oil will not do what it used to do for us. It will not allow us to use one source of revenue to pay for everything that we want and need. And you can see it in the production numbers when we look at the fact that this year, because of COVID shut-ins, we're down to just basic safe production maintenance, but otherwise no exploration, no new development in 2020, none to speak of. And that is a lost year for us in trying to get production back up, because that is the one thing we have to focus on, is getting the oil and gas companies to invest more in our state to produce new reserves of oil in significant volumes to help offset these natural declines that we are going to have in existing fields. These are not perpetual producing fields. There is no such thing. every field runs out of oil sooner or later. And so we are seeing some production challenges in the next 3 years that are going to make it very difficult for us to think that we can balance our budget on oil. Another perspective on this is just the total value of oil. You can see it back when prices are high, even when production was lower, $23 billion in 2011 in terms of the total value of the oil that we produced. But then you can see where the prices collapsed in 14-15 and dropped down in 2016 to 8.2 billion in the total value of oil produced. And that's just the gross value. That's not taking out any expenses, any profits, any taxes. That's just what it was worth. We saw a little bit of a bump up over the last couple of years, but then here we are in 2020, where we are projecting the value of all the oil produced in our state at a little over $7 billion. That's not a lot. And when you look at the coming few years, it's not going to go back up by that much, not based on the volume and price projections that we are currently working with. And I bring all of this up only because our organization, in the interest of full disclosure, is vehemently opposed to Proposition 1, which is proposing to increase taxes substantially on existing oil fields and companies doing business on the North Slope. This is a terrible time to be doing this. This is an industry that still has a big place in our broader economy, with almost 78,000 jobs and over $4 billion in wages, over $4 billion being spent with companies, with over 1,000 Alaska businesses, and over $3 billion being distributed to state and local governments in the form of taxes. That it is still a very important part of our overall economic and government picture. But raising production taxes 150 to 300% in times like this, when today ConocoPhillips announced that year to date they have lost $76 million in our state, and to target these 3 producing fields that account for 84% of our volume, it creates tremendous uncertainty for the investment market as to whether or not they want to invest in our state. It makes us less competitive for those increasingly harder to find investment dollars. And finally, the ballot box is no place to be doing complex legislation like this. This is really technical stuff, and it takes a lot of time. ACES and SB 21 both went through dozens of legislative hearings, public hearings, multiple amendments, testimony from experts from both sides and both points of view in terms of what the taxation legislation should be, and ultimately resulted in past legislation. That's the way we believe this should be done. And so we're asking everyone to vote no on Proposition 1. If you have not already cast your ballot yet, we hope you will join us in voting no. So that's my one brief issue. I will mention that AEDC is not an advocacy organization. We don't normally get involved in issues like this. I can count the number of times in the last several years that we have taken a position on a municipal or state issue on one hand and still have one finger left over. It's not something that we do, but we felt that it was very important to share our point of view on this, and we've been doing this in every presentation that we can, especially when we have a recession combined with the COVID-19 situation that together has cost us, will likely cost us 17,000 jobs between 2015 and the end of this year. 17,000 jobs lost in our city in the last 6 years. That takes us back to 2001 employment levels. We have lost 2 decades of job growth. It is not an easy situation that we are in. We have a long, difficult path ahead of us. And the dark days of this winter are going to be probably particularly dark for many businesses and many workers. We are hopeful that more federal aid will come forth to help carry those businesses and workers through this winter. But at this point, we have nothing in the pipeline beyond the funding that we've already received, which must be expended by December 30th. After December 30th, there is no federal aid at this point. So that is something that we need to pay particular attention to in the coming weeks to make sure that our congressional delegation is actively advocating for a new round of business and workforce assistance. And quite frankly, we need a big infrastructure bill that Alaska can benefit from to build roads, to build bridges, and to build ports, like perhaps the Port of Alaska, which is a $500 to $600 to $700 million project that needs the funding that would put hundreds of workers to work here in our city. COVID-19's blown us up. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. This is a really unprecedented historical event for our city and our country and the world. And we are going to be dealing with the challenges that come with something like this. Now, can we get through it? Absolutely. There is no reason we cannot come through this with a lot of success, comparatively speaking. But that requires all of us as citizens of Anchorage to do our part. We need to wear a mask. We need to wash our hands. We need to socially distance, and we need to avoid groups other than our pods. We need to keep our groups small. And I know this is a pain in the butt because I love to go out and eat. I love to go to movies. I love to get out and go to events. It's how I get through the winter a lot of times. And I understand everybody who feels that way. But we've got to work together on this. We've got dozens, if not hundreds of businesses in Anchorage that are asking us to please do what we need to do. We've got thousands of employees who are putting their health at risk by going to work, and their jobs that are at risk on a daily basis with the increasing count of potentially seeing the business close and them losing their jobs. We've got thousands of them begging us for you to wear this little piece of cloth. And if this little piece of cloth offends you, then I would ask that you stay at home, because we just have to all pitch in. And I don't want to, it's not about, I'm asking you that if you don't want to wear a mask, that you don't take risks with other people's lives and livelihoods. So, those are the things that can help us carry through as many businesses as we possibly can to have as strong a foundation upon which to rebuild our economy in the coming years. We need to all work together on this. And I hope that you will all share that message with your coworkers, your families, and your friends. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop there. All of our information that I just presented here today is available on our website, aedcweb.com. If you feel like I've been up on my soapbox a little bit today, I apologize for that, but these are issues that are critical to the future of our economy. And I'm hopeful that I didn't depress you all. There is a bright spot ahead. It's just our will and our willingness to get the job done and get us back on a path to growth. So happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'll kick off the question period with the first one. Can you provide any insight into how remote work is going to change our landscape? Because now, especially with the higher cost of living up here, people can move elsewhere, work here, and vice versa.
Right. Well, it's the jury's out. There's a lot of different trains of thought in the world of economic development as to what this is all going to result in. We are taking the tack that we are trying to attract remote workers here to Alaska. Setting aside our recent dramatic spike in cases, we have been the beneficiaries of the lowest death rate in the United States. Sounds a little morbid, and it definitely is, but it is something that people are paying attention to. We believe that we have an opportunity to attract remote workers here who will deliver their services elsewhere in the country and the world and deposit their paychecks here, which could be a real boost to the local service sector economy. Having said that, there's going to be some question marks out there in terms of whether or not Anchorage looks the same in terms of white-collar offices when this is all said and done. We are watching that very closely. There is a definite change that we can feel and see, but we haven't been able to quantify it yet. A lot of the initial media reports of mass migrations out of large population centers are turning out to be somewhat hyperbolic, a little bit of an overstatement of the case. There are areas that are seeing some of that migration, but not necessarily to the degree that the media has represented it, at least not in the data that we're able to access this early into the situation. I think as we get into next year, we'll probably see more definitive data that will tell us what kind of a hand we've been dealt thanks to COVID when it comes to remote workforce and the potential for workers to leave our city for other locations in the United States and the world to deliver their services here. We're going to do our best to make sure that that doesn't become a big issue, but there's only so much we can do.
Yeah. One more question. I read in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago, and it was talking about where should people go travel next year, and Alaska was listed as number two. Is that, what are your feelings on that?
We saw that article and we were very excited about that article. That's a nice endorsement for Alaska as a viewed as being the equivalent of a foreign, unique destination that with mystery and great scenery and great opportunity. So we're hopeful that that is going to be a driver in U.S. tourism coming here within the United States, as opposed to what many may view as a riskier travel plan of going abroad. Having said that, we still have some pretty big challenges with getting anywhere near to where we were going to be this year. We were projected to see 1.4 million visitors come through our city, just the city of Anchorage, on their way to Alaska or on their way from Alaska. By the way, that's an Alaska joke for Alaskans. We all know that Anchorage is 20 minutes away from Alaska. Having said that, I am hopeful that we do take into account the beginnings of a recovery to the tourism sector. We're just not sure how willing travelers are going to be to the risks of travel, whether by cruise ship or airplane, to get here. And there is also a question mark on whether or not Canada will open its borders in time for next year's tourism season, and how that will affect rubber tire traffic across Canada into Alaska from the lower 48, or how it may even affect the cruise industry, which was a big problem this year under the Jones Act issues facing that industry, where you have to go to a foreign port first if you're a foreign vessel leaving a U.S. port before you can go to another American port. There may be a waiver, I don't know. Those are all unknowns at this point in time, but I will say that it is great that we rank that high in the thinking of Americans, because that will be a positive sign for a stronger recovery than we might otherwise have.
Wonderful. Anyone else have questions?
Please don't tell me I've so thoroughly depressed you that you don't want to know more.
Hey,
I'm happy to answer any questions.
this is Beth Barnes. I was curious a little bit on the impact on small businesses, and if you could talk a little bit what we're seeing. I think what I've seen is some have fared very well during the pandemic, but others not quite so well. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I sure can. It's always difficult to get data this early on into a situation, but we found one tool that's called an economic tracker. That is, forgive me, I'll bring it up on my other screen to where I can tell you exactly where you can go look at this too. If you look up tracktherecovery.org, there is a great tool on there where they are tracking certain data. And one particular one that we're watching is the Small Businesses Open. Now, this tool is a great tool because it tracks transactions based on, credit card transactions or PayPal transactions by businesses in Alaska. How many businesses are doing transactions, which means they're either open or they're closed. Well, right now it's telling us that just over 37% of the businesses, small businesses that were open in January in Alaska are now closed. I want you to think about that. One of our worst months of the year economically in terms of volume and activity, and we're down 37% as of September 29th compared to that same time frame. Now that's statewide, that's not Anchorage, but I can pretty much guarantee you that Anchorage is probably at least at that percentage. It's been a hit. It's been a hit. You are absolutely right. There are a number of businesses that are weathering this storm with flying colors. Some are even growing. And there's a lot of entrepreneurship out there where folks are trying to chart their own course and take over the direction of their own destiny by getting out there with some great business startup ideas related to COVID. Sanitation businesses are doing great. Businesses that have been previously storefront businesses that have pivoted to home delivery and have done it successfully with a great online presence, they're doing well. Those are some of the kinds of businesses that we've seen a lot of success with. But there is a pretty substantial portion of Alaska businesses that are no longer open. And I would believe in most cases permanently. And that's going to be a big vacuum and set of opportunities in the coming years for new startups. But right now, it's a pretty significant headwind for us to get through. Well, I've depressed you even further. I've been trying to find some bright spots in this, folks. And there are these small victories that are taking place, these great little startups that are out there swinging away. There are businesses that I'm just in awe of who have completely pivoted their business model and are really doing some amazing things. There are people who are just continuing to work and smile. God help me, I see them in the grocery stores when I go in there, and I look at these clerks and I know they're out there just kind of hanging in the wind, if you will, hoping that nobody comes by that's going to share a virus with them. And they continue to smile at me when I go through the check stand. And, God, if we can keep that kind of an attitude in our city going through this coming winter, then the sky's the limit for us going forward.
So you commented on briefly how some businesses are doing well, or there's been some entrepreneurship. Can you comment further on that? Out of every crisis comes unexpected opportunity. Do you have any other ideas on unexpected opportunities to come?
I think that there is going to be some opportunities that we don't recognize. And, so that means I'm not going to be able to tell you what they are. But, that's the thing that these kinds of crises tend to bring out, is things that we don't expect. And that's what smart business people and smart entrepreneurs are going to keep an eye out for. It is a challenging time in Anchorage. There are a lot of businesses, nameplate businesses, that we've known for years and love, that I am worried will not be here next spring. But I think that there is also a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs who want to go out and blaze a new trail to pursue that and to find opportunities. I'm just looking up right now. We just got word on a new business today that I've been aware of, that's in my building here at the Peterson Tower. Let me bring up that, they have just been very successful in competing for a new, for recognition as one of the most investable businesses in the United States. And I'm just trying to find that notice, and I can share that with you. Here I am. I meant to write this down, and of course I didn't.
Would that be Wind
here we go.
Talker Innovations?
I'm sorry?
Wind Talker Innovations?
Yes, in the Pepperdine Business School competition. One of the 20 most investable businesses in the United States, most fundable companies in the United States. There's a vote going on right now. So if you look up Pepperdine most fundable companies, you'll find the announcement. And I hope you'll all go vote for these guys, because they've got a brilliant idea for creating a whole new form of interconnected device model. And it is fascinating what they are working on. And I think it's well worth anybody's time to go in and look at their pitch and take a look at what they're doing. And then I hope you'll vote for them. There's a lot of other great companies in that list, and I voted for a couple of others because they ask you to vote for 3. But I really liked what they're doing, and they've been talking to us about it in fits and starts. But we just got the word a few days ago that they had made the top 20 list. And boy, I sure hope we can help them get over the top and get a lot of investment, because that could be a great start for us. Cybersecurity is another area that I think that there's a lot of opportunity for. Currently in the United States, well, globally, excuse me, there's 2 million cybersecurity jobs going unfilled. And that has a lot to do with training, but it also has a lot to do with companies to employ those workers. And I think that there is a significant opportunity for that kind of business, given the challenges that we are facing with people with bad intentions trying to get into our networks and into our systems and into our phones. That, I think, is a great growth field for Alaska entrepreneurs to think about. Those are the ones, and then anything to do with COVID-19 mitigation for the next couple of years, because it's not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to be with us for a while. I think that anybody who gets into that field has some opportunities. It is finite, because hopefully we get the virus behind us. But I think that this has brought a whole new level also of attentiveness and awareness to the risk of infectious disease in our homes and in our workplaces and in the public. And I think that there will always be a higher level of demand for those services, probably not as much during the COVID pandemic, but post-pandemic, but I still think it's an opportunity to get started up, well, sustain themselves for the coming years.
I have a quick question. This is Amber Leach on a much simpler format, I guess. Are there numbers? Are there a way to have numbers on how honestly, the alcohol industry and the pot shops have done during COVID, whereas people aren't able to go to restaurants, but they're struggling emotionally, financially, mentally, their stress levels, those tend to be, whether healthy or not, to coping mechanisms that people will turn to. So how have those businesses done?
You know, in the early stages of the pandemic, we tracked the pot tax revenues, and they were up modestly, but not dramatically. It was more in line with just natural growth of the sector, with more outlets opening up and more people deciding to imbibe. The alcohol numbers, we haven't started to collect the local sales tax on that, and I haven't seen the state numbers for Anchorage yet. They tend to lag. I would say that yes, there has probably been an increase in consumption of those products, but I can't say to what significant degree yet. It's still, we're only 6 months into this. And I haven't seen, thank you for reminding me about the marijuana data. I will be reaching out to the city because they haven't published it like they normally do. I usually get the notice when the data comes out, and I haven't seen it in a while. And honestly, I had other fish to fry and other issues to focus on. So I apologize for not having that information at the tip of my tongue. Normally I do.
Mr. Popp, this is Jolene Thomas. I have a question. As a local community member, outside of wearing the mask and following the mandates, what can each person actually do to help our local community?
Well, there are a lot of different things that we can do. If you have the financial means to do so, I want our local restaurants patronized to the greatest degree that we can. There are a lot of workers who are still employed in that industry who are down to part-time. We need to get as much volume up as we can in those businesses. If you're uncomfortable going out to eat, buy a gift card. That helps the business. It helps it a lot. Yes, it's a bit of a risk. There is a chance that that business may go under and you'll never get the value of your gift card back. But those are things that you can do. I would say, breathe. It's okay to breathe. 2020 is the year we all want to forget, and I can't wait for it to be over. It just can't be over with soon enough. But, in the same hand, we've got to maintain a good positive attitude. People have been getting a little cranky. I understand that. I've found myself doing that every now and then. And it's just because this thing just never seems to want to end, and it's completely upending the way we want to live our lives. Being kind to others while being safe is something else. I will tell you, I was in the drive-thru at Starbucks the other day for the first time in several months. And I was pulling up because I had to hustle to get to work, and whipped out my iPhone with my barcode on my Starbucks app to pay, and the young lady at the window in her mask said, "Oh no, sir, the gentleman in front of you just paid for your coffee and your breakfast sandwich."
That just
Total
happened
stranger.
to my husband too.
Total stranger, no idea who he was. These are the kinds of small gestures that I think we can all do for our economy and for our neighbors and for our friends. And, try not to get so wound up. If you've been feeling yourself doing that here recently, it's not good for you and it's not good for those around you. And, any way to find a little more patience is going to be incredibly important, because we ain't seen nothing yet. It's going to be a bit of a tough winter. And then, of course, it's 2020. La Nina is back, which the last time it was like this was 2011 and 12, when we got 133 inches of snow. So I think we all should be taking up skiing and snowshoeing. I think that'd be good for us too.
Yes.
I'm sorry, that was slightly flippant, but it's the truth. I mean, I think we just have to find lighthearted moments as much as we can and just be good to each other, in addition to those small things that we can do for the local economy.
Mm-hmm. Any other last questions? I know there must be some.
You guys can't let me off the hook this easy. Come on now. One more tough question.
Hey, this is John Palmer. You briefly touched on the initiative that AEDC put in place to encourage remote workers to make the move to Anchorage. Can you expand on that a little
Yes.
more, what you guys specifically are doing?
Right. So I'm not the lead on this for our team, but I'm giving them general guidance and approval. And so basically what it's boiling down to is we're doing a lot of work on social media. We're doing a lot of outreach to national media to get stories done on Alaska, wherever we can, that tell the positive opportunities that are related to remote workers. We're starting to network with some of our own networks of remote workers here in Anchorage. You guys, if any of you are on the line, you're kind of hard to mention. You guys keep pretty tight circles, but we're looking for you because we want you to be the endorsers of the opportunities of quality of life here. So if any of you are there, please feel free to reach out to me afterwards and I'll connect you to our communications director, who is looking for those who will, answer questions from out-of-state remote workers, because they don't want to talk to talking heads like AEDC. They want to talk to people who are walking the walk and living the life. And this is the kind of grassroots things that we're doing. We're also building a plan for a targeted national media campaign that will involve some dollars. Our current estimate is somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 in targeted 30-second spots that we can identify specific key demographics that tend to fit the profile of remote workforce on platforms like Apple TV, Hulu, all of those folks who have an amazing level of detail on all of us and can help us to target those folks to see our ads about what a wonderful place Alaska is to live, work, and play right here in Anchorage and work from. And so that's kind of in a thumbnail what we're doing in terms of that effort. It is evolving, and it is an effort that we launched. We'd actually been launching earlier this year for business attraction, and we pivoted it to the remote workforce because right now investment is kind of sitting on the sidelines evaluating opportunities, waiting for the bottom of the market to start make those investment decisions. So we got a little bit of time on that yet. We think next year is when it's going to be prime opportunity to really go after additional business investment in addition to the remote workforce effort. I hope that helped.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's the top of the hour. I want to thank you so much. Got a lot to digest right now. And any closing comments?
I just would share, folks, if you want to reach out to me, I'm the easiest guy in Anchorage to find. Just Google Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. You'll find my contact information right there on the website. Drop me an email, hunt me down, and I promise you will get a response from me. It may take me a day because things are a little busy right now, but I am happy to engage with any of you with any additional questions you may have that you didn't think of until after today's event, or if something just pops to mind that you want to suggest to me or more information that you need. Would love to have more conversations with anybody who would like to have it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me be here today and allow me to give you this presentation. Again, it's the news. It wasn't intended to be depressing. I hope you'll still feel positive when we're done. But in the same hand, we've all got to recognize where we are so that we can know where we need to, how we get to where we want to be.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.